So welcome, good morning, and thank you for being here. Really happy to see you. So I would like to acknowledge that I am currently on the unceded ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Stolo people. Yesterday, I was on the Point Grey campus and I was walking by the reconciliation pole. Every time I walk by that pole, I just find it is so beautiful, and I always see something new. And of course, it's been a week since the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and that is a significant, I guess, step to have that day. And then I try to find ways to learn myself. And so the poll is a really powerful for me reminder of the children who lived through abuse and were separated from their families. And so wanted to kind of just bring us back to that reality, though the reality we're going to be talking about today is very different from that. So for anyone who's just joined, please know I'm fine with video on, off, and that the session is being recorded. So why this session? I forgot to say, I'm Isabelle Iqbal. I'm a senior educational developer at the CTLT. And I've been helping instructors with their dossiers for about 20 years and I've been doing mostly on a one-on-one basis. When I first started, we were doing workshops, and prompted largely by my involvement with the teaching development program, where I saw so many people asking questions about dossiers, and there is, I think, a lot of lack of clarity around how do I do this at UBC? What does it mean? How do I go about this? Then I thought it would be it's a
I think your screen is frozen, or is it just me?
Her screen's frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, even I was about to say that.
Worst case scenario, Isabel is I'm one of her colleagues here in the center. So I was excited to sit in and learn from her today. So I do have all the slides. We can have a chat if, we take a few minutes and she's not able to join us again. But I am noticing that my internet is telling me it's unstable this morning. So maybe we'll give her a few moments and hope she's able to rejoin us. I can maybe ask folks, what is your familiarity with teaching philosophy statements? If you've created one before, if this is new to you. I think there's many different ways we sort of come to the point where it's sort of like, oh, what is this thing? It might be required from a particular role you're finding yourself in, or it could be something that you're doing for your own personal reflection and development.
I can start. I have created one a while back, but it was just sort of guessing, to be honest, of trying to put something together. So,
Um, I was just hired this year as an assistant professor of teaching, so my teaching philosophy statement needed to be quite a substantial part of my package. So I spent quite a bit of time working on it, but it was the first time that I put it together. So it's probably in need of a number of updates. I haven't had any opportunities for feedback on it or to look at or for any workshops on it. So I'm looking forward to refining it as we go through this process.
I'm in a similar boat to Sarah. Just started about a year ago as assistant professor of teaching in forestry, and thinking forward to tenure cases and promotion and reappointment, and just making sure it reflects who I am.
I was appointed also last year, and for my application, for my job application, I had put like 5 sentences, 5 lines actually, yeah, 5 or 6 sentences for my teaching philosophy in the whole package. So yeah, I would like to learn more that I can expand on it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. For my current position, I was just hired also about a year ago for an assistant professor of teaching, and so I had a statement for my application package and just looking to refine and learn a bit more about it.
So I think I have a very unique lens here, and I'm probably the outlier in this entire group. I come from the administrative side of UBC. I'm in central HR and lead the talent retention and career navigation. So my curiosity, I heard about this teaching philosophy in one of the other CTLT webinars that I was in, and I found it really intriguing because I'm always asked what is the career navigation philosophy at UBC, and so how might I articulate that? And I find a lot of parallels to what we do for faculty and how they approach their work. So here I am trying to connect the bridges and come from this lens. Thank you. And Isabeau and I are coaches, so we belong to the similar community of coaches, and that's how we know each other.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And thanks for your patience as we're shuffling a bit in the back end. What's really strikes me and is helpful for me as well when I think about the teaching philosophy statements. If you are a researcher, you have done something similar for your research proposals, your grant proposals. And as a few of you mentioned, you're sort of starting my career in this role here. Same with your research. That proposal that you started with, that grant proposal that got you into that position, it is something to go back to again and again and build on. So when you're facing new positions, new choices, new directions you'd like to go, it's a reminder that you likely already have material that you can draw on. You have experience, you have teaching experience that you can build on and structure in a particular way to support what you want to do. The way that Isabeau had structured this, it is a really nice framework of a definition, a concept, an example, and then some reflection on your part too. So the very basic shape of the day, introducing some of the basic structures, the basics, figuring out what you want to say. So it's from your perspective, thinking about your reader, some quick tips on do's and don'ts, and then your feedback. The good news is that Isabeau is always available. I'm always available to help as well. And there's more support upcoming very soon oh my goodness, next week. So this will be a workshop on drafting and feedback as well. And more events will be coming this fall on teaching dossiers. As I mentioned, sort of structure of today, introducing some of those concepts. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Let me see if I can grab my chat here so I have it up. There we go. Add them in the chat, unmute and ask. And yeah, as you feel comfortable. Okay, basics of the teaching philosophy statement. As I've mentioned, this is a chance for you to share who you are in a particular way around your teaching. And a lot of it does come back to values and perspectives. Teaching at its best is a reflection of who you are and who you are with students, who you are with colleagues, and who you are when it comes to assessment and evaluation. Now, this isn't just a reflective, idealistic piece. It can also be really important to include examples that show. So the statement of who you are, sort of your personal statement, but then examples that show who you are as well. Depending on the context, this can be called a variety of things. So depending on what the structure is for, it can be called a teaching statement, your approach to statement, our approach to teaching statement. And depending on, again, your position, the role, this will differ from things like a diversity statement, educational leadership statement, which is a very specific aspect, or a positionality statement. But you know that there is overlap. So when you think about who you are as an instructor, of course, that is not distinct from how you imagine inclusion. Of course, it's not distinct from how you imagine your progress as an instructor as well. This framework, you might want to screenshot this for today, and I know Isabel will share this as well. I really like this, how she structured it, because it's the why and then some hows. So starting with why you teach, coming back to your core beliefs, your values. That is more of that reflective, maybe those big statements. And talking with some colleagues recently, when I really think about why I teach because it's world making, right? We make the world with our students when we teach. Now, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? Okay, how do I do that? What are some of the specific things that I do? So that means, are there opportunities for me to work with students to design assignments, design evaluations, design course components, select readings, select activities? That's more of the how as well. So strategies, methods, approaches. The other point to talk about is how you assess and support learning. So when I said, teaching for me is world making, okay, how do I check in on what are the worlds that we are making together? What are some of the artifacts, products, evidence that students are generating in our time together to create those worlds? You'll see that little grayed out bottom of the part, how you grow. This can also be an aspect of your teaching statement. For now, the focus we're really going to emphasize is that why, maybe some of those big ideas, those big values that are so important. And then recognizing when we're talking about practical examples, it can fall into the what we do, and then what we do around some of those conventions associated with teaching, feedback, and evaluation. And when I'm talking about feedback, that can apply to student feedback from things like course surveys. It can also include feedback that you solicit from students throughout the semester. So formative feedback, check-ins that you could be doing. You may very well be including a variety of approaches, assessment, feedback techniques throughout your teaching. And today might allow you to start to group some of those things. And in the different programming that's coming up this fall around teaching philosophy statements, you will have this opportunity to maybe give some language and vocabulary to things that you are already doing in your practice. I'm going to pause there for a moment and check in with folks what questions might be coming up for you. And you see this sort of preliminary framework for shaping your ideas, the why and the hows. Seeing a few nods. If it works for you, great. If there's any questions coming up, do let me know.
I think I'm already recognizing that my statement does not have enough information about the why. I really liked that you were saying the I guess analogy, or not analogy, but your why has to do with building worlds and doing that in collaboration with your students through teaching. And I really like that idea, and that particular statement made me realize that I don't have enough of the why yet. I focused more on the other three. So that's already one place that I think I can add to mine.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. And I would say you probably have a why. It's just the spending time articulating exactly succinctly what it is. And that is kind of one of the things I really enjoy about working on these statements. It's really distilling, okay, why do I do this? Why is it exciting to go to the classroom? Why is it rewarding? Why is it valuable?
I was just going to chime in. This is also, yeah, I find this is a very helpful framework. I think I'm a bit of the opposite, maybe, is more about like how I assess and support. And I've got some why, but maybe just breaking down more into like how you teach and building on that. I think.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Jen. It's
Yeah.
that balance, right?
Yeah,
As
it's a
much as
balance.
I can be very eloquent about world building and this opportunity just to connect with students. Okay, how?
Yeah. How? Yeah.
How are we going to see
Lots of
that?
thought. Yeah.
And it's also really valuable to do that work because you are beginning to articulate the how to different audiences, right? If we can tell um, a teaching evaluation committee, a tenure and promotion committee, we can also be working on telling students, how am I going to build a world with you? Because if I walk into a first year course and say, I'm so excited for the world building we're going to do this year, that could be a little bit off putting to start. However, if I say, you're going to have a chance to help us build the final assignment for this course. Okay, that's a very different approach. So, again, much like, and I go back to that research proposal idea, the more you have opportunities to describe, define, and share your plan, the same thing happens with the teaching statement. We are shaping who we are, how we do our work for a different audience. Okay. I've mentioned a little bit, yes, these different audience, different purposes. Some of you will have already done them, as you've mentioned, for your academic job applications. You've mentioned you're thinking ahead for promotion, tenure, reappointment opportunities. There's also the role of the teaching philosophy statement in award applications as well. You could be thinking about how you might want to include a statement on a department website, because this can help undergraduate students, graduate students know more about you and your approach and how they might work with you. And it can also be an important part of that reflective practice as you continue to refine and build as an instructor. Okay. This is an excellent question. Does it really count? This can depend on the conventions of your department, the conventions of your institution. I'm really sorry Isabel isn't here with us right now because her institutional knowledge of UBC is immense. I have just started back at UBC about 2 weeks ago. So I was at a different institution, but I've come back. So I'm still sort of getting a lay of the land around frameworks and evaluation policy. So I will leave that slide for now and encourage you all to come to more teaching philosophy statement workshops and connect with Isabel for those elements. Isabel's really stressed this idea of your voice. And in some of those things I've said so far, it has to be you. This is where I would be hesitant to turn everything over to an AI and sort of paste the output into the final document, because you have to be in this piece that speaks to a particular audience. So there's different scholarship and writing about what an effective TPS is, and this idea of authenticity. That can be really challenging in academia because very often we write according to disciplinary conventions. Your teaching statement needs to be authentic to you and reflect where you are in your discipline, in your career as an instructor, and thinking about where you are right now. So it does not have the same constraints, potentially, as that research proposal. You can be reaching to potentially scholarship within your field around teaching or across your field around things that speak to your values around education and teaching as well. So as you're thinking about, okay, how do I articulate this for where I am now? I would encourage you to come back to that point about what does it mean to be authentic in this space that I'm now writing into? This is an example from one of our colleagues here in psychology, a statement where you can see, I'll just give it a read here. People give life to a well-designed course. In my best lessons, I barely say a word. Everyone in the room is creating, debating, and explaining ideas with each other. Crucially, research shows that peer-to-peer dialogue and collaboration helps people learn. So when you look at this statement, what do you think? What strikes you about these words? What resonates with you? What do you notice?
Here she's kind of describing what her vision looks like in an actual classroom, giving some more concrete details about everyone in the room is creating, debating, and such, and then grounding it in some citations and giving a precise strategy to help us, like peer-to-peer dialogue and collaboration.
I also appreciate the lack of jargon. It's easy to read interdisciplinarily as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Kate and Sarah. Other things folks are noticing?
I was so surprised to find there's so many secondary literatures included in teaching philosophy, which I have had no idea before. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if that's the Euro practice or it's something based on personal choice.
Yeah, for folks that have written a teaching philosophy statement before, if you have included literature, how have you done so? Or where did you make decisions to include literature? I'll let folks share before I jump in.
I didn't include any references in mine, but I might now that I've seen this. The examples that I was looking at and the information that I found as I was kind of researching how to do it and crafting my own didn't have any references. But I like this because I think it feels very personal, but at the same time, it's demonstrating to the reader that this approach is also grounded in evidence-based practice, as opposed to just a personal preference. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. And if we go back to the why and the how, when you think about your experience as researchers and scholars, the how is calling on existing scholarship, calling on existing methods, pointing to where you are drawing these elements from. We're not just making them up out of the air. Like, we draw on evidence-based practice, and that is the same with teaching as well. And as I mentioned, you could very well be doing a number of different things, and it might just be learning the terminology or becoming familiar with the vocabulary of the effective practices that you're already doing. So there's a wide, rich, deep, and amazing field of the scholarship of teaching and learning. And as folks mentioned, this notion of interdisciplinarity, being able to read across this. So if your professional teaching practice also includes reading around what teaching is, there are some fabulous and really influential texts and scholars that have helped shape how we think about education. So being able to draw on some of that work can show your audience that you're familiar with evidence-based good practice around teaching and learning. This will, of course, reflect your journey, right? So it could be teachers, instructors within your discipline. It could also be folks outside of your discipline in education that you feel a resonance with, that helps support your why and what you want to do. That first example we saw was conventionally, I would say, academic scholarly writing in a way. This second example here, from a colleague at the University of Calgary, I think it was the turkey dance that did it. An embarrassing moment that started my journey into teaching pedagogy and process. I primarily teach human physiology, courses that are typically jammed full of facts and processes. I'd been turning muscle mechanics, a real page turner, and could see from the glazed faces that the point wasn't hitting home. What I appreciate about this is that it really speaks to the how in that authentic way. It's taking this moment from a lecture, from a class, from a lab, something that has happened, and reflecting on it. Recognizing within this discipline, we are often really fact-focused, content memorization, really requiring students to get deep into information. And there comes a moment as an instructor where you recognize, I've completely lost them. They are not with me. So a question around, okay, what are the hows? When's the moment when you've lost students, and what did you do to bring them back? How did you bring them back? How did you get them back with you? And often it comes back to the why as well. So when I talk about world making with students, if I've lost students, okay, how do I bring us back together? Okay, so now I'm back to those practical, specific things that are happening that I can mention. And this is what? Five lines. They've highlighted some disciplinary conventions in the field. They've named what they primarily teach. They've made this connection between pedagogy and process. And they've spoken to their awareness of what's happening in the moment around teaching. So this question of what does authenticity look like in a teaching philosophy statement? Two very different examples, and at the same time, very authentic to the individual who's sharing them. While these pieces are personal, we can already start to see the individual behind. And there's a difference between going deep into individual histories and influence, and it's also about creating in writing who you are as an instructor. So this means sometimes that our skills as researchers and scholars, where we want to go back and look at all the existing literature for examples and everything else, can be challenging us because those push certain genres and conventions. It's good to know what exists in the field, and it's also about finding our personal voice as well, making sure it sounds like you. There was a description, I think it was, sorry, I can't remember if it was Kate or Sarah who'd mentioned this idea of the way that things are included together that reads interdisciplinary. A teaching philosophy statement should be accessible for somebody outside of your sort of discrete research circle, right? Because it's very likely that the individuals who are reading this teaching philosophy statement might share a broad scholarly background with you, but they likely won't be able to assess if you're speaking directly to how you are applying sort of a very contemporary theorist around a particular activity. That might lose the person. So thinking about how you can speak broadly, authentically, that's it, authentically as an instructor, and to reach that audience as well. Coming back to these three elements: why you teach, how you teach, and how you assess and support learning, grounded in your context, expressed in your voice. So we've already seen gestures to discipline. You might make gestures to the population that you're teaching. So if you're working mostly with earlier undergraduates, if you've done some really interesting work with graduate students, if you're working with students and community? What is it about your teaching context that either you've selected or that you found yourself in that helps you speak to what is specific, authentic, and unique about you? As much as has to be you, has to be authentic, this is the opportunity to tell your reader. And that notion of it has to be broad enough for someone who might not be exactly familiar with your particular teaching context. You're setting the stage. You're describing who your learners are, a distinctive feature of your teaching setting or discipline, and the role you find yourself inhabiting the most as a teacher. So give me one moment while I share our resource page here. Okay, if you're in the document, you can see very, very brief sentences, right? Who are your learners? I teach large first-year lectures with 250 students. That's it. That's the context. It can be that simple. Most of my teaching is with graduate students who are already highly motivated. Easy context. This is, some of the nuts and bolts that I think can be easily left out if we jump to the why. And if I start talking about, I am world making with my students. Okay, what does that even mean, Megan? What are you doing here? Okay. If I said, some of my most rewarding teaching experiences have been with upper level undergraduates in hands-on activities in the classroom where we explored how to creatively, using chalk, using chalkboards, using art supplies, to investigate concepts, theories around memory and culture. I should probably write that down somewhere. That's not a half-bad sentence. Shoot. Okay, well, we're recording it. I can back watch it later. When you look at these examples, again, very short sentences that move from, here's my context, here's more about the environment, the teaching setting or discipline that I'm working in, and then getting into a bit of that why. What is your role that you take on as a teacher? So this statement by Dr. Wolfman, our colleague in computer science, my first task as a teacher is to help students find their motivation to learn by making computer science exciting and contextualizing it through connections to research, everyday problems, and intriguing puzzles. That might not be a bad first sentence of a teaching philosophy statement. So as you're looking at examples, as you're thinking about these frameworks, you're also learning, okay, where do I want to start? What's the first point I want to make? Where does my story flow from? As I mentioned, coming back to that why, core beliefs, values about teaching and learning, spending time with this question. We see an example here from our colleague in engineering. My actions in the classroom are driven by providing a space where students can learn, experiment, ask questions, and ultimately master engineering professional practice. What I like about this statement is that it's sharing the notion of practice, and particularly for folks in disciplines where students will be going into these practical fields. You're mentoring new folks into these practices of medicine, law, dentistry, engineering, teaching. So showing how you are welcoming folks, mentoring them into this work. You can also talk about how you mentor students into that work of scholarship as well in your why. This second example from our colleague in medicine, students are the masters of their own learning. Therefore, an effective instructor must, 1, guide the students to reach their full potential, and 2, cater to a diverse student body with different needs. To manifest these goals, my teaching practice emphasizes supporting, encouraging, and engaging learners. That's not going to be fair for me to can't show the two at once. If you think about this first one, the subject here is the instructor. It's Jonathan talking about what they are doing in the classroom. This second example, the subject are the students. So as much as this is about you, it's your authentic voice, finding ways to center the student can also be a way of articulating your why. It can also show practical examples of your how. What am I doing? What are students doing? What are we doing together? So again, thinking about structures as well, it can be those sections. What am I doing? What are students doing? What are we doing together? And these can be ways to start to group your ideas as you work on articulating elements of your teaching philosophy statement. All right. Isabel has given us some reflection questions. I will invite you to have a look. Maybe I'll give you at least a minute to read, review. Pick one. And if you're comfortable, let us know your thoughts on it. You can share in the chat, you can come on the microphone, whatever works for you. I'll just give folks at least a minute to review and reflect.
A real value that I hold is inclusivity. And so I can write the sentence, a value that shapes my teaching is inclusivity. And then I kind of get stuck on where to go with that. So I'll just share that sort of feeling that I get. I don't know if that resonates with others.
Being able to name that value and then what?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of the things you do are they're really small gestures.
Yeah.
And they seem strange to write down sometimes. So providing space and safety in the class. I don't know, they sound strange when you write them down.
At the same time, I would encourage you to keep writing those things down. So you mentioned providing space and safety.
Yeah.
And as you continue to go deep, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? So if we are drawn to a prompt around, okay, what is a value, or what's one thing my students will carry? So Janice has shared passion, internal motivation. Great. Okay. What does that mean? What does that look like? So even if we're feeling a little bit stuck on, I can name my values, and what does that mean? What does that look like? This is a great place to start. It can also be a place to speak with someone like Isabel, speak with someone like me as an educational consultant, potentially look to folks in the field as well. I've excited my little show and tell. Let me see. You know what? Can I unblur this background? Let me see if I can do that. Okay. So this is a book that I really love. It's called A Pedagogy of Kindness. So this work by Kate Denali is, when we think about, okay, what is kindness? Yeah, that's a big value in my teaching. Good news is someone has written a book about it. So seeing how she defines and describes kindness, what kindness is and what kindness isn't, has again helped me articulate, oh, right, okay, kindness isn't toxic niceness, right? There's a difference between being kind and being nice. Okay. So looking for these places to continue to explore these words that come up for us. And as we dig deeper, okay, who can help us further articulate what they mean? Sometimes it can be our own practice. Sometimes it can be talking with someone in a coaching or consultative role. Sometimes it can be looking at literature and resources as well. I'm just looking again at what Janice has shared, and I notice in this statement, I look at, so Janice is positioning themselves, I hope my students, there's instructors, students together, and then what students are going to do. And if we're thinking about medicine and doctors, yeah, I would like doctors that are focused on exemplary patient-centered care. That sounds good. So not necessarily having to speak to the intricacies and specialties of a particular subfield, stepping back a bit, okay, why are we doing this? We're doing this to educate the next generation of physicians and surgeons who will move into patient-centered care. Very cool. I'm feeling all inspired. You know what? I didn't expect to be sort of facilitating this discussion with you, but it's making me, I'm enjoying it. It's making me very excited to be a Tuesday morning. Questions, comments so far on where we are, where we've been, and sort of exploring and articulating these whys.
Just want to say, Megan, you've done a fantastic job of coming in very last minute to facilitate this discussion and provide this presentation with us. So thank you so much. It's been really helpful. Yeah.
I agree. I was thinking that too. You just had to pivot very quickly, and I appreciate you keeping the conversation going as well.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask if there are any other books or resources that you have found helpful as you're thinking about your teaching approach.
So many. I wish I made more of a note as well. So there, as I mentioned, like there's a full field of scholarship around teaching and learning. One text I come back to again and again is Bell Hook's Teaching to Transgress. Their work around sort of teaching as liberation, right? Teaching as resistance. And for me, when I have a number of colleagues in the United States that are educators in the post-secondary system, and the work we do now seems so challenging and can be really hard and really frightening. And then I also look to the work that they're doing to articulate how they continue to keep going. Because students matter, right? Students are making the world with us. So reading some of the blogs, Blue Sky is a place where I hang out as well to see sort of folks in my field. So if you're on social media, which is its own hellscape of indeterminate means, but if you're on a social media platform where you're sort of following people in your discipline, one thing to do could be like, who are the instructors in my discipline? Who might I follow around? Where are their conversations leading? So, yes, and I would love to chat more about this. I would love to think about sort of who those key influences are that help me say things like teaching is world building. So yes, absolutely would love to have more conversations about that. All right. This could be the part where you're probably already doing some very effective teaching practices. You might not be able to name them yet or give them vocabulary. So reaching into those strategies, methods, and approaches that align with beliefs, motivations, values. This can also be a good way for you to check in, because if I say, I believe teaching is about world building. So every class, we have 2 multiple choice quizzes, and then they sit and write and don't talk to anyone for 30 minutes. You can see how that approach doesn't line up with those values and those beliefs about teaching. So this could be a chance for, okay, how are my practices aligning with my values as well? So here's an example from our colleague in law. My classes combine theoretical knowledge with practical application. A significant portion of class time is dedicated to active learning exercises, where students engage with fact patterns, either in groups or class, to sharpen their legal analysis and advocacy skills by arguing both sides of an issue. Through this process, students begin to develop their legal legs, initiating the long transition from law student to future lawyer. I read this and I'm like, great, that sounds very lawyery, instruction-y, great. Don't know exactly what fact patterns are, not my area of specialty. But I can see they're describing debate. Okay, yeah, I know what that is. They've named active learning exercises. So active learning is an approach to really effective instruction And it's when students are doing something with their learning. So doing something can be reading, reflecting, writing on their own. It doesn't always have to look like doing a turkey dance around the room. But even inserting this phrase, active learning, and then saying, okay, what does it mean in my class? That means debate. So they can do it in groups or as a class. And what are they doing in that active learning? Developing their legal analysis and advocacy skills. This final sentence gives us a sense of how this instructor views their students as those developing practitioners. Right? They're on this long transition from law student to future lawyer. Again, those practical degrees where, yeah, this person is going to be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. So it can be very clear about where you see your role in that process of support. This is from a colleague who comes from a field where there isn't necessarily that practical entry into the job world or employment practical world. So they write, one of my primary teaching goals is to help students be critical of the world around them in ways that make them want to enact change. To that end, I offer in my courses opportunities for students to learn about current happenings and analyze them using histories and theories they've learned in class. In the introductory level American culture course, our examination of the hate crime incident began when I saw the front page headline in that day's college newspapers. Immediately, I went to the newspaper office. So I'm looking at this, and this is sort of a discipline that has a lot of complementary aspects to the disciplines that I've been involved in. And I'm going, check. Primary teaching goals, be critical of the world. Big value, big goal. Course opportunities to learn about current events. Okay, check. You're applying how we make this relevant to today. We analyze them using histories and theories. Okay, we're bringing disciplinary approaches into the real world. Check. Teaching context in the introductory level American culture course. Check. Our examination of the hate crime incident when I saw the front page headline in that day's college newspaper. So thinking about how this is assembled, we've got that moment, right? An instructor sees the headline in the college newspaper and how they've taken that and structured a lecture around it, an activity around it. So as you're reflecting on your teaching experience or things that you might like to do, it can be sort of taking that one moment. Where did this come from? Where did this exam come from? Where did this activity come from? Where did this lecture come from? Where did this engagement with students come from? If that comes down to, yeah, being able to pinpoint a single moment, then how do we start from there and go bigger to how this reflects our values and our goals? All right, I will offer it back to you. I'll give you 2 minutes just because reflection takes time. I'll give you 2 minutes to reflect. Should be sufficient time to build. No, I'll give you 2 minutes and then I'll invite you to share as you feel comfortable some reflection prompts on the how. I'll leave them here for you.
Maybe I'll jump in. Something that I try to do when I'm teaching is to incorporate diverse perspectives. So I teach in special education, and there's lots of room for incorporating diverse perspectives. And through incorporating diverse perspectives, I try to help my students to think broadly and be curious about the different issues that we're talking about. So that when they go out into the world and are practicing as special educators or clinicians, they are considering the range of experiences and learning histories that everyone is bringing to the table. And I try to foster opportunities for curiosity through the different activities that we do in class that are linked to diverse perspectives.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. I so hope that you'll be able to watch this recording again and then go back and write all that down. Again, these moments when you're in conversation, oh, right, that's why I do this. Oh, this is how I do this. So whether it's making a voice note for yourself or texting something to yourself. Once you've given yourself permission for that time and space, yeah, documenting. Okay, so these reflection prompts give us that starting point to start to draft these ideas, bring them into the world and articulate. This last element in the framework of the how, so getting into those practical items, so strategies, methods, approaches that align with your beliefs, values, motivations around assessment. So when I mentioned that idea of, okay, if I welcome students in and say, I really believe that through teaching, we're world building. And if I say my assessment is one final exam that's worth 100% of their mark, that doesn't really align with the notion of world building with one high stakes exam at the end of the semester. So this example from our colleague at the University of Michigan, evaluation will be based on distance covered, how much and how far the individual student travels from first class to last in learning to apply her whole being to the subject based on regular written responses in the form of journal entries, class participation, discussions, tests, and questions. In this description, we've got a variety of activities and assessments that the instructors name: journal entries, class participation, discussions, tests, quizzes, and also a holistic statement about how they view learning and evaluation. It's going to be based on how far a student goes in the time that they have together and being able to apply that learning with their whole self. Another example from a colleague at the University of Michigan. At the same time, I work with my students so they can meet these expectations. I offer multiple assignments and encourage my students to meet with me before and after each paper to identify ways to improve their work. I also make explicit that my grading reflects the trend over the course of a semester, giving students an added incentive to do this extra work. So much like the how of those earlier slides talking about what the instructor does, what the student does, what the student does together. And as Isabel notes, this can be a part that's easily missed out. Okay, how am I evaluating what a learner is doing? How am I actually able to check in that my teaching is effective, that it's producing the results that I want it to? So in these examples, we're seeing different descriptions of the assignments, assessments, and evaluations. We're also seeing in this example as well, how do you tell students how they're going to be assessed? Do you do it in a syllabus? Do you do it in explaining assignments sort of at regular intervals, checking through? So in this example that this colleague shares, again, the instructor says, like, over time, they're handing in this paper, and then I meet with them, encourage them to improve before and after. So a question when you're thinking about where are those assessment evaluations, what are the checkpoints in your course where you check in with students to see how their learning is moving? So you can be looking back at, your syllabus. You can be looking at thinking about the semester as a whole. When are those periods where you're handing back assignments? When are those periods when you're adding potentially more student hours or office hours? And those can be examples of how you are creating spaces for students and building on opportunities for you to check in with their learning. These reflection points, again, around assessment. So similar to the ones we were thinking about the hows in sort of practicals of what you're doing as teaching, same questions around assessment. If someone observed me designing an exam, they would notice. If someone observed me offering feedback to students, this is what they would notice. Okay, there's an and. Thank you, Isabel. You put the slides there, so you'll have all these lovely reflection prompts and the examples as well. So you can go and check out where the examples are drawn from in their larger context. Ooh, go ahead, Isabel. It's time for your 2 cents.
Well, I'll make this super short so that we have time to wrap up. One of the things that you'll want to think about, and when you look at the slides, you can take a little bit more of a look at this, is to what extent, if at all, you are connecting to institutional priorities when you're writing your teaching philosophy statement. So, because of course we all teach within a context, and for us here, it's UBC, but if you were applying for a position at another institution, it is important. And so even though, at the beginning there was some points about how a teaching philosophy statement is different than a diversity statement, than an EL, an educational leadership statement, et cetera, like they are interconnected. And so this is like totally my 2 cents worth, but if I were writing my teaching philosophy statement as an instructor at UBC and I made no mention of diversity or no mention of Indigenous engagement, I think that I would be remiss, because these are such important priorities for UBC. So that's something to think about, whether you are staying here or whether you are applying for other positions, that there's a bigger context that you might want to address in your teaching philosophy statement. And we're at time. So there was a very quick feedback poll, and we can drop that. There's some do's and don'ts, but essentially this is the first time that Megan is offering this session. And so any feedback that you have around support, modality, et cetera, you don't need to answer this now, but feel free to email Megan or myself with any questions and thoughts around what we could do to support you further. So I do want to respect the fact that we said we'd wrap up at 1:45. And Megan, thank you so much. When I shared everything with you yesterday, I didn't anticipate this would happen, but you never know. And so that's wonderful.
Thank you, Isabel, for such a wonderfully flexible framework. Thank you all for your patience and grace
Yes.
this morning. I've really enjoyed the time with you, and I do hope you'll connect with us. And I look forward to chatting more about your teaching philosophy statements.
And I'm happy to hang out. So I'm here if you have any questions, but otherwise, thank you all.